I bow. Have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. Over my being, absolute sway. Fill with thy spirit, till all shall see Christ only always living in me. Next song, number 527. Where do we say to for the okay. It's up to you guys. Sean wants to do 527. I have heard it. I don't know if I looked it up or not, but I don't know what to lead. Let's see. What is the last one again? Is it Heaven Came Down? 517. Let's go to 517. Check that. No, that's all right. Give me the tune that starts this. I'm familiar with it. Sing lead from your seat. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful day, day I will never forget. After I wandered in darkness away, Jesus my Savior I met. Oh, what a tender, compassionate friend, He met the need of my heart. Shadows dispelling with joy, He made all the darkness depart. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. When at the cross the Savior made me whole. My sins were washed away, and my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. Let's try another verse. Let's try two. I've sung the bass to this, and I like it a lot. I recognize it now. Never done it before. Let's go again. This too good. Born of the Spirit with life from above, into God's family divine, justified fully through Calvary's love. Oh, what a standing is thine, and the transaction so quickly was made, when as a sinner I came. Took the offer of grace He did proffer, He saved me, oh praise His dear name. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. When at the cross the Savior made me whole. My sins were washed away, and my night was turned to day. Heaven came down and glory filled my soul. You guys sound great.
The ladies sounded good up here.
It sounded actually really pretty up there. I liked it.
It's really neat when we sit close together as far as the singing.
Yeah.
It really helps.
Let's have some more discussion tonight, and what I want to do is dovetail the 2 Sunday morning sermons from the last 2 weeks. So I want us to talk about 2 topics, and as far as I'm concerned, I think these are essential ingredients to walking the way of the cross. Severe sincerity. Sincerity and single-mindedness. Single-mindedness. Can you really be a follower of Jesus without being these? start with here about sincerity a little bit. And again, we could recall a couple of the key scriptures that we emphasized or highlighted. One of them being from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8, where Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So when we read some of these scriptures, we're actually getting a better idea as to what we mean when we Stephen led a song this morning. Was it pure in heart? Yeah. So purity talks about the state of our heart. And what were some of the other words that well, here's another verse which uses the word sincere. Hebrews 10 and 22. Let us draw near to the throne of God with a sincere heart. Another passage, Ephesians 6 and verse 14, talks about having, it's Paul starting his image of the armor of God, and he talks about having your loins girded with truth. So when we talk about sincerity, we're talking about people who have a pure heart, about people who are truthful. What other words might we add to that? Some of the ones we mentioned, if you can remember. Authentic, genuine, one that comes up a lot is real. And then some of the negative ones, well, if you remember in that sermon, I asked a question, something like, or I made the statement, nothing hurts the cause of Christ more than fraudulent religion. Or a follow-up to that, maybe with a little more precision, nothing harms the Church of Christ more than counterfeit Christians. Now, what do we mean when we talk about counterfeit Christians? That would be the opposite of sincerity. Someone describe a counterfeit Christian to me.
Someone who puts the act on, but they're doing it for their own personal gain. What can I gain out of this? So I'm not a real Christian. I'm just, like if I own a business, well, if I go to this church and act like I'm one of them and they're one of them, then maybe I can gain something out of it.
Okay, so maybe
Politicians might do that.
putting on a front with an ulterior motive, perhaps your heart's not really pure. Let's go to Nick and then we'll come to Jeannie. Hypocrites is another opposite of, so a counterfeit Christian is a hypocrite. Does anybody know what the word hypocrite means?
You go back, like if you pass a counterfeit bill, you try to pass on something to another person, and they think it's real.
Yeah, that's a good illustration.
It's like, you need to, if you're a counterfeit Christian, you try to pass it off.
Yeah, now years ago, Nellie, you might have been arrested for giving someone a $2 bill. The $2 bills haven't always been legitimate, have they? Wasn't it in days gone by where the $2 bill was a fake? I don't know, but anyway, I like it. $2 bills? $3. Okay, well.
$3 bills are used at racetracks.
Nellie surprises you once in a while with a little gift of a $2 bill, and it's really quite, you don't see them in circulation a whole lot. I don't know, you must have you just asked the bank for them? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you have to put an order in. Now, I want no more. I want
Yeah, crispy ones, yeah.
I want one.
So a counterfeit is, Mark said it really well there, where you try to pawn off something as if it's real, but it's really not. It's not true. It's not trustworthy. Jeannie?
I think that when you act one way, like at church, or it's like, you have, how can I say this? At church, you act one way and then you act a different way at home.
Yeah,
At church, with church building, with church people or fellow Christians, when you are worshiping in the church building, you're one way, but then to your kids.
yeah, so you show up on church, and you go in the front door, and you're just all smiles, and you're maybe even singing and praying and doing all the things that everybody would expect. And you have the appearance. I ask you, what does the word, Nick, what does the word hypocrite mean? Do you know the actual literal meaning of that?
Yeah, but.
Isn't it H-I-P-P-O?
Hypocrite. Overacting. Or actually the word is play acting. You're just putting on a front. So part of the damage to our walk with Jesus comes when we behave one way when we're at church, one way maybe we might say on Sundays, but when we leave the building and we go back home as a husband or as a wife, as a mom or a dad, we're not the same person. And our household is filled with all kind of stuff that it shouldn't be. When we go to work, how sad it would be to work alongside of somebody for a long time, and then finally one day you get up the courage to ask them to go to church with you to come to worship, and they say, I had no idea that you were a Christian. Nellie?
You know, whenever you come to church, you should act a Christian way. When you leave this building, you should act the same way.
Yeah.
Now, I have had people to tell me that they have come to church because they have watched me the way I have lived my life.
No.
And that is the way I want to do
And
it.
isn't that gratifying when others, they see your sincerity, and that was one of the points that I made in that sermon, if you remember. There's nothing that is a greater magnet to people than a congregation of people who are real. But this is kind of like we were talking in the Bible class this morning in our home builders class about kids. How was it said? Oh, children know what was the context? Was it that the point we were making was you can't really hide it from the kids.
What Jeannie said.
Yeah, what did you say this morning?
You made the comment.
You said, should we try to hide it? Should we try to present ourselves as, right all the time? Or
Not faulty or guilty
I
or
said you don't
know.
have to.
Yeah.
So,
So
because they know already.
yeah, and that same thing is true in the church. I don't know. You don't have to be a master at having a good sense about things, but it seems to me like you can go in a gathering and you can tell when people are real and genuine, when they're sincere. And you can sense when there's something counterfeit that's not right about it. So we're not trying to say that sincerity is perfection, because if we're claiming that, none of us would be able to say, I'm trying to be sincere. We're not. In fact, that runs against the very grain of the concept of sincere. Sincerity has a double dose of humility. So we're not saying by needing to be sincere that we're perfect by any stretch, but we're trying, we're earnest, and we're really genuinely trying to walk in the path of Jesus. Now, does that mean we will not stumble? No, it doesn't. Are all of us, even the most sincere among us, are we sinners? We all have weaknesses. We all fall short of the glory of God, so we recognize that, and we cut each other slack on that, as we should. But our goal is to really be real. And when we don't do that, I don't know how we can claim to be going the way of the cross. And the thing about this beginning word, sincerity, is that it has to infiltrate every other aspect of our, whatever it is we're going to talk about. Self-denial or sacrifice or suffering, even in times of sorrow. It has to just cover all of those. It can't be that we're just sincere. We're just sincere in a Sunday evening setting when we're here talking about the Bible. It has to go out wherever we go. The thing that sometimes I think we get hung up on is we're so church-focused. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Nobody loves the church of the Lord more than I do, I don't think. We love this body. We're not talking about the building now. We're talking about when the church congregates together. So we surely want sincerity here, but what we can't miss on is that the church is not just here. The church is everywhere we go when we leave here, because we are the church. So when we're working, we need to be letting our light shine. Not putting on a front, but really letting our light shine. When we're playing on the ball field, we had discussions about this in the past where years ago some of us would get together on a few different things. Sometimes we play basketball, and when you get 10 or 15 guys that are out of shape and aren't real ball players in the first place, and they're out on the hardwood and they're trying to, play ball and show their toughness or whatever, sometimes it gets a little scrappy. And sometimes you say things and do things you shouldn't do. And so we would have to remind ourselves, why are we here? And we're inviting our friends to come, and is this what we want to show them? Come out to the basketball game and let's see how mean we can all be, and then come to church with us and let's see how sweet we can all be. Same thing on the golf course. Sometimes a golf course can be a beautiful setting, and it can bring out the devil in a guy. To do some things, say words that you shouldn't say, or throw your clubs in the pond, or, whatever you want to do. Just kind of the competition. That's why I thought it was really neat that Bubba Watson would describe himself first and foremost as a Christian. And I would hope that, I haven't watched him so closely that I know every minute of how he behaves on the golf course, but I would hope that that would be reflected on the golf course. That people that watch him play golf might look at him and say, well, he's kind of cut from a different cloth, isn't he? Nick, and then Jeannie. Was your hand up, Nick? Haley, was your hand up? Okay, I'm seeing.
I was thinking about
Jeannie?
Well, that's kind of what I was talking about, because I think I know people, and I hope I don't do this, but that they dichotomize their lives so much that they actually act like they think that things are okay as long as they're not at church. Something could be wrong if they're at church. But then when they, segment their lives and do things in, like in the realm of entertainment or sports, like you say, it's actually okay to be one way. And, we're talking about kids this morning. Boy, they pick that stuff up and with lightning speed.
I want to be sensitive here because I think everybody has felt the pain and heartache, most everybody has, of children that don't always remain faithful to the Lord, and so we're not trying to add to that pain. But sometimes part of that comes about when children are raised in a really strict environment. Oh, they could never think about missing the service. You could not miss Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening. That was mandatory, no excuses accepted. But what the children heard throughout the week, or even the nitpicking that went on, I'm not so naive to not be aware of the fact that probably every time I preach, say something if you want to about this. You're on your own if you do. But I suspect that just about every sermon I preach is sometimes picked apart. Am I wrong about that? Well, we'll never know, will we? Because the privacy of some people's home, the preachers used to talk about you have the preacher for Sunday dinner. And they don't mean you invite him to your house and he's sharing in the meal. They mean you're picking him apart. You go home to Sunday dinner, and next thing you know, the sermon is dismantled. And everybody looks for something. Now, that's overly negative. I know it is. And I don't believe that's true of all in our congregation. But I know firsthand, I have been on the receiving end of that from some in this congregation, from some in other congregations. And sometimes it's one of these, I don't know, it's one of these blind spots. You say, how can a parent not see that? How can a parent take their children to Sunday school and want to bring them up in the ways of the Lord and then go home and criticize the elders and the preacher and just be mean-spirited about the whole church? How could they do that and think that they're going to bring their children up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord? Nick?
I always think that's really interesting that like some of the people that I value as value as preachers the most are, you don't see them behaving like that. Like it's sometimes people who haven't. You don't see them what, Nick? You don't see them behaving like that, or talking about other preachers like that, or putting them down like. I mean, like I've never heard that, you or David Black or Rob Sheldon, like, I need to talk constructively about each other, but you're not ripping each other apart or wanting Fox down at Harding like the preachers that I really looked up to, even at Harding. They never talk about preachers or other people like that. Like they seem to have that reality check that they understood. When you see people that treat people so poorly, it's weird. It's not the people. It's not like the best preachers in the world are the ones who are doing that to people. It's I don't know how to put it into words. It's the people who haven't ever done it, haven't lived it. They haven't been a preacher. They haven't been in your shoes, and they just think. Yeah, that was one of the comments I was going to make, and I'm pouring out my soul here tonight. One of the hardest things. Everybody is entitled to make criticisms. It's the way you do it, maybe. But sometimes people are harshest in their criticism don't have a clue what's involved in preaching from week to week. You said
they don't have a clue, and they do a lot of damage. Trust me. You might say, well, the preacher could say, well, why should I hear what they say? They don't know what they're talking about. But it hurts nonetheless. And you think you'd think there'd be a little bit of humility there. I've never preached, but I want to tell you how to do it. All right, Jeannie.
I just think that it doesn't only have to be the preacher and the elders. And my bottom line is we are as Christ ones, we're supposed to be all about love. And you don't nitpick people that you love. If you think about your own family, on a regular basis, you might do it once in a while, but on a regular basis, you cut them slack and give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's not that we're supposed to enable each other or never confront each other or whatever, but you don't nitpick people that,
Nitpickle?
Yeah,
so that's a good word. You don't nitpick people you love, I don't think. You give them
Nicholas?
credit.
Nick and then Betty, are you getting ready or are you just scratching?
Haley was just
Haley?
telling me, yeah, you said
No.
better.
I was saying that sometimes I think people who maybe nitpick like that or have a lot to say about something they don't have much to know about are really not, I think they sometimes speak out of defense for themselves instead of actual knowledge. You know, sometimes maybe like, how did I say it? Like,
Not because they have so much insight into how to be a better preacher, but they're so insecure
like
with
an insecurity of
themselves.
themselves or
They,
trying to make up for something they find negative about
I
themselves.
think that's a valid point too. I think I've seen a lot of that. All right, well, let's move on just a little bit. We won't be long here. It gets darker now, so we want to get Nellie and Betty home before it gets too dark. The one more thing about this, and that's the word integrity. And integrity, sometimes we think, well, it just means being honest. And it does. That's okay if you want to think of the word honest when you think of integrity. But think more of the word integrated. And that gives you the idea, the real idea behind integrity, is that your sincerity and your single-mindedness is so interwoven in your life that there is none of this dichotomy or dividing that Jeannie talks about where we're Christians on Sunday, but who knows what we're going to be Monday through Saturday. At home, on our jobs, when we're playing basketball or golfing or whatever. No, that's not real. Real Christian integrity means that we are who we are all the time. That Jesus has so worked his way into our lives. He has wound himself into every little nook and cranny that there's no area of our life that is not under the lordship of Christ. All right, comment or question there, Vic?
Well, when I look at integrity, it's like you're saying always, in every situation. Now, you might come into a situation where if I veer from my Christianity, I will gain an advantage. But we have to say, well, I won't take that advantage. It could even be a promotion. I won't take that promotion because I know what it will do and what I have to do to maintain that promotion that doesn't fit my Christian principles. I can't set that aside for my own personal gain.
To do so would be kind of to sell out,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? To sell out our faith.
You know, you use the Bubba Watson thing. There's another athlete that just got into that particular football hall of fame, and then Randy Moss. And one of the things he did when he was
A little louder, Mark, for everybody.
an acceptance speech, when he said the 3 F's: faith, family, then football.
Did he put them in that order? That's
Put it
great.
in that order.
Mark's a fan of Randy Moss because he almost went to his house one night.
it's like Duck Dynasty, faith, family, facial hair.
Faith, family, and what?
Facial hair.
Oh, yeah.
One time we were traveling and I got sleepy. We had one of these silly times when I insisted we leave at 4 a.m. in the morning. And by the time we got to Charleston, I was so tired, and Jeannie and Mark and whoever were sleepy, and I got lost. I made the wrong turn. And the next thing you know, we ended up somewhere like close to
Dow
chemical.
chemical plant.
Dow chemical plant. But there was a little
Dow's going turkey on.
there was a little stop there So I told Mark, I said, you just go out and ask him, how do we get back on 76 South? And when Mark went to the window, that guy was saying, you know, Randy Moss lives